Check it out. It's the Laugh to Learn podcast. What is going on, everyone? Welcome to episode 13 of the Laugh to Learn podcast, your weekly source for a comedic spin on all the goings-on in the world. I come to you from the Great White North every single Tuesday evening, Eastern Standard Time, fresh for download to listen to or stream at work on Wednesday morning. That is, of course, for everyone all around the world on any major podcasting platform. And as always, this podcast comes to you completely ad-free. And all that I ask as some form of payment, if you want to call it that, is that you subscribe on any podcasting platform or over on YouTube, and then you tell your friends about me. One friend every week or one share every week would be absolutely incredible. I see all the love I'm getting. Thank you so very much. Let's help those numbers continue to climb. And if you listen over on YouTube, I apologize for not being very involved over on YouTube, but it is not my platform of choice. You can check older episodes for that. But I'm going to make an effort because I'm getting large numbers on a few videos at least over on YouTube. So I should probably do something about that. Now, folks, today is another very different day. Of course, last week, my Maple Leafs got knocked out of the playoffs, and, you know, it is what it is. We're not going to talk about it. But for this week, as the great philosopher Drake once said, quote, "I'm upset," end quote. Because the people of Venezuela were lied to, and man by the name of Maduro, the leader of the country, failed to conduct a proper election. And today, several months later, the people of Venezuela have ultimately had enough, and they've begun to fight back against the man who actually once said about the United States that they, quote, inoculated Commander Chavez, who was the former president of Venezuela, with that illness to get him out of the way and create a situation of destruction for Venezuela and its independent revolution, end quote. That is a real quote about Maduro, the current fake leader, fake dictator of Venezuela, saying that the United States inflicted Chavez with cancer. That's what he actually believes. Legitimately. That's real. Because this dumbass wants to hold on to power tighter than Michael held on to young boys. So I've decided to make jokes about him for the podcast today, while at the same time informing everyone who may not know just exactly how we got to where we are today. So, of course, what's happening today is very muddled, so I'm not going to get into all of what went down today, but I can for sure talk factually about how we got to this point. So that's my plan. That's what I'm going to do. Honestly, I feel helpless in this situation, and I really want to do something, but what can I do from all the way up here at like the, you know, whatever, lateral, parallel, I don't know where the hell, I don't know how GPS like that works. I don't know where I am on the globe. I'm just far away from Venezuela, so what am I supposed to do? Well, it seems to me my only logical chance to help is that I make an episode, that episode goes viral, gets translated into Spanish, it gets slid into Maduro's DMs, and he listens to it intently, and ultimately it upsets him so much that he decides to pitch himself off the tallest tower in the capital city of Caracas. That's my hope and dream today, at least. And if that doesn't happen, well, maybe I can gain a few new fans from this episode. So, strap in. Once again, I'm going to go straight through only one topic this week. We'll see how long it takes me to get through it. And when it's done, it's done. So, please, until the very end, remember to tell your friends, laugh along with me, send me any questions you may have about what's discussed today, and I'll see you on the other side. Of course, by the other side, I just meant that 3-second guitar clip. So, Nicolas Maduro Moros, or simply Maduro, and honestly, his last name defines him perfectly, Moros. Ugh. He was born in Caracas, of course, the capital city of Venezuela, in the year 1962. So he ain't that old. He should be smarter. He describes himself as mixed race, claiming to be a mix of African and indigenous. And in 2013, he added that his grandparents were Sephardic Jews. So to me, it looks like we have a South American version of Elizabeth Warren on our hands, but if he survives this coup, maybe we'll be able to get Ancestry.ca involved and really test his background. But until then, we only have what's written. His musical tastes are so interesting that I have to mention them. He claims to be greatly inspired by John Lennon and the 60s and 70s counterculture. Now, he also mentions Robert Plant and Led Zeppelin of being of great interest to him, which is also of great irony from my perspective, because much like Led Zeppelin, Maduro believes in stealing from the working man and using their work to your own benefit. That was a hardcore music nerd joke. Of course, Led Zeppelin is widely criticized for plagiarizing some of their most famous songs. Anyways, back to the man of the hour, Mr. Nicolas Maduro. He attempted high school, at least he attempted it, and I say that because, as with all great political leaders of the past, he dropped out at some point and never cracked open a textbook again for several years at least. Now, this saddens me greatly because even if this episode were to be translated into Spanish, as I alluded to at the beginning, my jokes would be too sophisticated for a man who once said that Spider-Man, yes, literally Marvel's Spider-Man, was to blame for children committing violent acts in the country. So, I mean, hopefully Peter Pan is well hidden in Queens right now, because Maduro's coming for you, bro. Swing away. Swing away. Now, Maduro was first recognized by police in 1979, but not in the way most great leaders, comparable to him at least, were. Because, of course, Hitler was arrested at a rally. Maduro, on the other hand, not arrested at a rally. No. Police realized he was a dude when he helped to kidnap an American businessman who was held for ransom, tortured, ultimately to fund a leftist party which would soon join ranks with the now infamous Hugo Chavez several years down the road. So, literally, police learned about him when he helped kidnap someone. That's going from 0 to 100 real quick. Now, after holding a job as a bus driver for a few years, Maduro moved to Cuba, as all great, communists do, where he attended a communist-led political school. Remember, I told you he'd be coming back to school. And he learned under Pedro Prieto, a senior member of Fidel Castro's Communist Party of Cuba. Now, this is, once again, through the late 80s. And into the 1990s, it's actually believed that he was tasked with returning and infiltrating his homeland to help free Chavez from prison after the failed coup d'etat, which is where, of course, Hugo Chavez was arrested. For those of you who don't know who Hugo Chavez is, he was basically the Che Guevara happened in Cuba. Hugo Chavez was really inspired by Che, so he used the Castro's influence to try and bring communism, and successfully brought communism to Venezuela. We'll get to that in a second, but read about him if you don't know. He's a fascinating and very complicated figure. Ultimately, Maduro played a major role, though, in forming the movement of the Fifth Republic, which eventually supported and aided Chavez in his 1998 presidential campaign and win. So, yeah. In 92, Chavez was arrested for trying to start a coup d'etat, get the military against the government. Didn't work. He gets arrested. Literally 98, 6 years later, he's elected president. Crazy story. Definitely worth the read, at least for what happened in the 90s, because I'm covering Maduro, not Chavez here. Now, back to Maduro. Over the next few years, he would hold many different political positions within Venezuela under the Chavez government. And ultimately, in 2011, when Chavez was diagnosed with cancer, which I'd like to remind you, Maduro believes that the U.S. was responsible for infecting him with cancer. He probably should have stayed in school till at least the 12th grade. Maduro was announced to be Chavez's successor, at least internally, should he die. It was not made publicly until later. We'll get to that in a second, but it was announced to people within the party that should Chavez die of his cancer, Maduro was to be made leader of the party. Now, at the time, there was another vice president, but he at least appears to have understood and agreed with Chavez's decision. And ultimately, on October 13th, 2012, shortly after Chavez's final political win, his final electoral win, he then named Maduro his vice president, like literally 2 weeks later. Because there is nothing strange about campaigning with another vice president and then changing your choice 2 weeks later. Once again, at this point now publicly, that vice president, whose name is eluding me right now, he had fully supported them. I'm not even going to look up his name because he literally has faded away. He supported them politically, and he's kind of been around, but has not done anything of significance since being removed from vice president. They didn't off him. He supports them, but just kind of in the background, older dude, not relevant to the story anymore. So imagine if after Donald Trump's win, he was able to legally say, great, now that I won, Mike Pence actually isn't my vice president. It's this random guy none of you know, Steve Smith. So congratulations, Steve. You are now vice president, and they're going to deal with it. And I'm literally on my deathbed. I am dying, and Steve Smith is going to be president, and none of you voted for him. It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy, but all of this was completely within the law, which it's crazy, but it is, it is what it is, I guess. So ultimately, we all know that Chavez did end up dying on March 5th, 2013. Spoiler alert if you're one of those people that was going back to read the Chavez story. Sorry, but it wasn't Game of Thrones, so that's not the worst spoiler I could have thrown out there today. And Maduro became interim president because it was less than 4 years into the new term, and according to the laws within Venezuela, an election needed to be held within 30 days. Now, in that election, Maduro won. This is the initial election. So Maduro did end up winning by a very narrow 1.5% margin. Now, Maduro agreed with the opposition initially to conduct a recount. But, much like Jacob and Bella, that shit ain't happening. And yes, that was a Twilight reference. Looking back on it now, no idea why I went there, but I did. So, no recount ever occurred. And again, he agreed at the time to do a recount, but it has never occurred. And then, in May of 2016, a petition was filed for a referendum vote to occur and to allow the citizens to decide in a real election whether or not Maduro should be removed from office. So this isn't a revote where you go and vote, do you want Maduro or this guy or this guy or this guy? That's not what was happening. This would have been a referendum vote to decide whether or not he should be removed from office. Ultimately, in July of 2016, the government jailed 5 individuals who were directly involved with this referendum and 2 other individuals on similar accusations that were not directly part of the referendum, but they were part of the political party that was engaging the referendum or attempting to have it engaged. So here we are. We are a few years now, 3 years after Chavez's death, 3 years and a couple of months, and we have had one election occur that Maduro won by 1.5% margin, and at this point in time, the entire world still viewed him as the accepted leader. It was a very close election, but it's believed that maybe he did bullshit that election, but it was viewed that he was a genuine leader, and he had agreed to do a recount, and it seemed like he was going to. Now he starts jailing people. So then, in this strange turn of events, on August 1st, 2016, the government stated that enough signatures had been received and an election would be scheduled, because legally they had to by enough signatures being signed on this petition. However, the government wouldn't allow an election until at least 2017, which the opposition party, again, this is on August 1st of 2016. So there are still 5 months left in the year. 4 months left in the year. And August, September, October, November, December. I can't count. August, September, October, November, December. That's 5 months. I went from 6 to 5 to 4. I'm back to 5. So they have 5 months in a year, okay, to conduct this vote, this election. And this was going to be, once again, just a referendum. Now, they wanted to wait until 2017, which at first, a lot of people would be like, okay, well, allow everyone to organize and campaign. Makes sense. However, it actually appeared to be an attempt to prepare a false opposition to ensure that the party remained in power. Because basically, if I control a ton of media stations and whatnot, I can go out there and create an opponent who believes the same thing that I do, but says things a little differently. And he basically tries to get me to win, but says things a little differently enough so that he'll catch all the other voters, and then we can just join together. And our votes get combined together, blah, blah, blah. You keep the party in power. Even if Maduro himself loses power, the guy he selects will take power. It's a very complicated way to stay in power democratically. Now, in a rather complicated way, Maduro ensured his leadership, of course, by calling, now this is where things get really complicated, calling for a constituent assembly election, which was run by a country now at this point in time in 2017 controlled entirely by one party. Because what happened was, rather than working to put a false opposition in place, which is what they were initially accused of trying to do, instead, the leadership had taken their extra time and removed opposition political leaders from power by citing, quote, irregularities, end quote, in their duties, and ultimately removing them from office or opening false investigations that forced them to resign from office. Now, eventually, this election took place, and elections are controlled by election committees, which are controlled by the government, and you have an entire government that is controlled by the Communist Party at this point. There were fewer than 10. There were like 10 or 20 opposition individuals in positions of power. So essentially, all of this election was controlled by Maduro, which is absolutely wrong, right? Absolutely wrong. So analysts describe the election as a, quote, show election. That's the official term they use. And most Western nations declared Maduro at this point a dictator. His support came from all of the places you would expect: China, Russia, and Cuba primarily, which really, other than Cuba, those aren't friends you want to have. And the only reason you want Cuba to be your friend is it's a nice pot to spend a weekend. So could you imagine being told you can only vacation in Cuba, Russia, or China? I'll have capitalism to go, please. Now, as with most dictators you may read about, within 6 months, he was given the power to rule by decree, which, let's be honest, okay? If anyone ever tells you, you may now rule by decree, in whatever fucking language, say it in Spanish, say it in Chinese, say it in Russian, say it in whatever fucking language you want. Sir, you may now rule by decree, or madam, you may now rule by decree. That means you're a fucking dictator, bro. Like, it doesn't get any more dictatorship than being told you may rule by decree. Just own it at that point. Be like, yeah, I'm a fucking dictator, right? That's what the rest of them do. This guy, nope, still says he's not. Next, he was given the power of Supreme Tribunal, which is a little bit crazy, which effectively, what it does is it places him above the law. So if a police officer or a military officer were to say to the President of the United States, sir, you're under arrest, It's kind of complicated because in the U.S. he could technically get himself out of that, but he can't do it at the point he is not above the law. He can get arrested. Now, that's the same across like almost any nation. Of course, it would never happen, but this effectively made him above the law. He could change the law if he wanted. He could say whatever he wanted. The courts could not do anything. Nothing against him. Still can't. So this was done under the guise of the rising economic crisis. Blah, I can't even talk anymore, which was arguably exacerbated by the civil unrest, right? So now you have all this economic unrest and then all this civil unrest, and it just combines together, as well as the dropping prices of fuel, like oil specifically, which constitute a large majority of Venezuelan exports. Almost all of it. That is how they make their money. And now, all of a sudden, fuel, which is still being pumped out of the ground, is worth essentially nothing. Like, it dove. It absolutely dove. So if you already don't want this guy gone with the wind, I'm going to give you a reason right now to do so, because he now has the ultimate power. He controls everything. What he says goes. A 2018 Amnesty International report claimed that Maduro's government was, quote, committing some of the worst human rights violations in Venezuelan history, end quote. I had to click on that report because I wanted to know. This is what Amnesty International claims, which I think that's a pretty solid resource that I would believe. The violence was carried out primarily in poor neighborhoods and included, this is a real number, 8,292 extrajudicial executions between 2015 and 2017. That's 8,292 government-conducted executions between 2015 and 2017. That's 3 years. 8,292 people were killed by the government in 3 years. On top of that, 22% of recorded homicides were conducted by security forces during that time. Now, that does not include an extrajudicial execution. That's not considered a homicide. That is fucking crazy. He has slaughtered his own people. Slaughtered. Primarily the poor people. Why? Because poor people do not like power when that power is doing fuck all for them. And he was not doing anything for them. And he's a working class man. And he left all of that behind. He forgot who he was. No leader. None. Who murders citizens so openly. And that's exactly what this is. This is murder. Deserve the power they have. They don't deserve protection, and quite frankly, this asshole deserves to be taken out by the military he grew up building, that he idolized and built. Poetic justice, my friends. Poetic justice. That's 2,764 people a year divided by 365. They executed 7.57, 7.5 people a day. Executed. Could you imagine that? Executed. Which means you committed a crime, so we're going to execute you, the government. That's fucked. It is so wrong. It is so wrong. I can't even make a joke about it. It's so wrong. This guy's got to go. Now, the opposition leader, Juan Guaido, was declared the interim president through all of this. Basically, the way it works, there's a bunch of associations that all kind of work on the election, and a few of these associations were like, yo, this was a fake election. So, by the way, remember he won by 1.5%? Now this second election, he won by 90%. 90%! He can't even fucking lie well. We've talked about this before with these leaders that don't know how to fucking lie. Like, they need to take an acting class or some shit. Jesse Smollett, I talked about this too. Like, I don't understand. When you're making a lie, at least make it sound, like, reasonable. You know what I mean? Like, when you look at Russian elections, Putin doesn't win by 90%. He gives it like, he won 45%, that guy won 10%, that guy won 5%, that guy won 2%, and I just won, or maybe a small majority, 53, 54%. This guy's like 90%. Everyone fucking loves me. They all love me. Like, what? Come on now. Learn how to lie, child. That's just wrong. You're not even good at it. You expect me to sit here, right? I'm not a Venezuelan citizen, but you expect me to sit here and believe anyone anywhere in the world gets a 90% approval rating. I was going to talk about flat Earth today. 13% of people believe the Earth is flat. 13%. That's the going number. You know how many people think the Earth is 5,000 years old? 22%. 22%. That's Americans, not of the Earth. Think the Earth is 5,000 years old. Those are crazy high numbers. And you're telling me all of a sudden 90% of people agree on something? 90%. Okay. Not going to happen. Where was I? So now Guaido, the proper leader of Venezuela, he was selected as he was the opposition in the election. He got the second most votes. Ultimately, people were like, okay, maybe, who knows? Maybe Maduro actually won with, some small percentage of the vote again. But fuck you, man. You lied to us. He probably didn't win. But you know what I mean? So now the people are like, nope, you gotta go. Second guy in votes was Juan Guaido. He is viewed widely across the world, other than a few countries that I've mentioned, as the proper leader and president of Venezuela in an interim capacity. So he wants to regain power, settle the country down, and run a proper democratic election, which he would probably win, and he would probably deserve to win. And I bet you if he lost, he would actually step down like a man instead of cowering like a little bitch hiding in his fucking walls. So thousands are protesting and fighting in the streets. This is a movement, and this is one of the most this was actually one of the most inspiring days of my life, watching this unfold right now, because I've read about this stuff in the past. Never as an adult have I seen it unfold. Watching people sacrifice everything for the freedom that they so desperately deserve and that we take for granted is truly awe-inspiring, truly awe-inspiring. And one thing history has taught us is that those who stand in front of freedom are often quickly buried beneath its power. I haven't even used now all of my Maduro jokes, but the story is over for now. That takes us to today. Tomorrow, which will be, are there 31 days in April? I don't think so. I think there's 30. Yeah, tomorrow is going to be the 1st. That is, of course, the 1st of May. And this morning, Juan Guaido, the interim president, said, the 1st of May begins today. Tomorrow is the day he plans to take this country back. And those words, the 1st of May begins today, will go, those are powerful words, man. This guy knows what he's doing. He's a political phenom. He understands it. He's clearly studied revolution, and he's there to take that palace tomorrow, or whatever the hell, castle. I don't know where the hell they live. But he's there to take that power back with all of the people of Venezuela that they deserve it. And as I was saying, I haven't even used all my Maduro jokes. But tomorrow's going to be the biggest march in Venezuelan history. And I hope things calm down and that Maduro walks away like the little coward he is, as he should. He should have his tail between his legs. He should be like, yo, I fucked up. I get it. Get on a plane. Fly to fucking Cuba. Live out your life in the jungle. I don't care. Just get the fuck out. You know what I mean? But if over the next week he's opted for, trying to fight, I hope that justice is swift and perhaps a little torturous, because fuck that guy. And I hope that innocent civilians, there's already been 71 injuries right now. No reported deaths, but I mean, there's video of a police vehicle, a large police, military is what I'm trying to say, vehicle, a big truck, just ramming through people in a crowd. And I'm sure there's a lot of that's not on camera, and I'm certain that there's been deaths by now. There's just gunfire raining down constantly. It's absolutely crazy. And also, fuck Cuba. Because, look, I've loved that country. Went there as a kid. I'm a Canadian, so I can go freely. It would be my South vacation spot until today, because Cuban forces are actively moving on protest groups with armed weaponry. And this is being said by tons of Western nations, and then all these little allied communist nations are like, no, Cuba's not there. They're not doing anything. No, I don't believe you. I really don't, because Cuba really only gets oil from one source. Russia even only gets oil from, they get a bunch from Europe, but they get a lot of oil from Venezuela. And Cuba can't survive without the oil coming from Venezuela because they're not buying our oil right now. And the U.S. President Trump just a few hours ago tweeted that he's going to impose a full blockade around Cuba. And you know what? They fucking deserve it. They fucking deserve it. I do not stand for that. You're a different country approaching protest groups with armed weaponry, not military forces, protest groups. That's what they're accused of doing. I'll never again spend money in Cuba. I'm done. Like, absolutely done. I do not believe you. I'm done with Cuba. Fuck Cuba. Now, although Che Guevara, fan. So let's go through some dumb things that Maduro has said and laugh at his greasy old ass as my dog comes barreling, charging towards me. So I want to note that everything that I've said about him so far is 100% true and verified, including the crazy quotes I've used, like the U.S. injected Chavez with cancer and shit like that. Like, he's actually crazy. So I decided to do a little bit of research. And here are a few more of Maduro's quotes in a closing segment. I know it's a bit of a short show today, but, you know, a closing segment that I like to call Fuck You, Maduro, where I give real quotes, and then I say, fuck you to the not-so-intrepid leader. So, first of all, when asked how to deal with the endemic food shortage that was affecting Venezuela, still is today, Maduro said, quote, "We need to reduce extreme consumption to achieve a point of equilibrium between supply and a fair price. I trust in the hard-working majority of this country," end quote. Yes, literally, Maduro, when asked about what he's going to do to help his people find food, because there is none, he said, they should eat less. Fuck you, Maduro. When talking about a political opponent, he pulled what is possibly the most moronic move of his political career when he said that his opponent was gay, and he's not gay because he has a wife. So he literally used his wife as a beard. Okay, he said, quote, "I have a wife. Listen, I like women. How good is the kiss of a woman, right?" Come on, Maduro. You can have your wife cook for you, and you can toss your salad on the side alone, you freak. Fuck you, Maduro. And lastly, I will pick a quote which I think proves how delusional and incredibly crazy this man really is. When he said he sleeps on Chavez's grave for inspiration. He said, quote, "Sometimes I come at night. Sometimes I sleep here. Often, in fact. You don't even realize it. The neighbors sometimes realize," end quote. And yeah, the neighbors probably do realize it. If I lived near a cemetery, and every once in a while the fucking president showed up to sleep on the grave of his dead idol, I too would notice. Yeah. In fact, it's probably very obvious that you're there with all the cars and security, you dumbass. But you're still a freak, Maduro. Fuck you, Maduro. So, in closing, I want to say publicly that if it wasn't obvious yet, the people of Venezuela have my full support, and I hope there is little more violence in this crazy event. Sometimes I think egos can take over someone's perspective on reality, and it's obvious to me that Maduro is and was and is indoctrinated by Chavez's trust in him, and he will likely do anything to maintain that control and to not let his dead leader, his inspiration, down, right? This is someone he looked up to his entire life that trusted him with this country, and he's losing it. So that ego that creates is very intense. It's very difficult to give that up. It's honestly not surprising at all to me that we are seeing this. And then, I mean, you add in the geopolitical problems with Russia specifically, China a little bit, and Cuba as well. It's a very complicated situation, and it hopefully does not end in some sort of greater global crisis, and hopefully not many more people are injured or killed in finally getting Maduro out of there, whether his head leaves out on a silver platter or whether he flies out of there on a jet never to return. I'm hoping this situation gets solved soon, and hopefully in not as violent a way as we were seeing today, but tomorrow will be either a very good or a very bad day. So I hope everyone in Venezuela stays safe, and I hope that they retain the right to vote, because if there is nothing else that I ever fight for and fully support, it is going to be the right to vote. That is a hill that I will die on. Absolutely. For absolutely anyone every single person deserves that right. And to have someone who you trusted and elected take that right away from you, shame on that person. And death to that person. I have no problem saying that if Maduro dies, I'm like, fuck you, bro. Should have followed the rules. Shouldn't have let your ego take over. You should have been like, my Chavez before me was good at this. I'm not. Clearly I was the wrong choice. And whatever, get the fuck out of there if you need to. But he needs to step down. Hopefully you learned something here today and you will share with your friends so they can learn of what's happening. And maybe there will be a way that we can all help in the coming days. Stay tuned to my social media. You can, of course, follow me on Twitter at Jacob Paveo or on Instagram at Jacob_Paveo. Both of those links are in the description to this podcast. And, hopefully, power is soon restored to the rightful owner in Venezuela, and it becomes a great nation that it once was. One of the most powerful nations in South America, and it's real sad to see where it is today. But I'm hoping that they can come through it. So thank you all for listening. Remember that this podcast is, of course, ad-free, and all I ask is you share it with your friends and family, especially this one. This is very current. It's not going to last very long, of course. In a couple hours, things may change drastically. So please tell your friends and family to listen. Read about this. Watch about this. It is crazy what's going on. The people of Venezuela, unfortunately, have had all outside media essentially shut down. They have no access to English news. They have no access to the internet in most of the country right now, which is horrible. How am I supposed to get listeners there? And, we really need to get information into these people so they can find out what's really going on. That is what we believe in a free society. And maybe there's going to be a way that we can all help. So just pay attention to that. Don't forget to subscribe to this on any podcast app or on YouTube. You can reach out to me with the contact page at laughtolearnpodcast.com. That's all one word, all spelt out properly, laughtolearnpodcast.com. You can also find that in the description. Tell your friends and family about me each and every week. Share it once each and every week, and I will love you forever. Thank you all. Really hope you enjoyed this episode. The Flat Earth episode is going to happen next week. Some people were looking forward to it. I stopped because of this, but next week we will talk about Flat Earth. So, as always, we are now only a week away from another episode.